Welcome back to Think Design Work Smart. I'm Alex Bolboaca and I'm coming at you from the Mozaic Works studios. And what I have for you today is a live stream, a special live stream with architectural kata. We are going to perform an exercise in architecture with your participation, and hopefully you will find this very interesting. I think this is a very interesting exercise. These are things that we do with organizations, with people. We've done this in communities, and I'm going to tell you all about it in a moment. Just to check a little bit that everything is working fine. Let's see. Okay, perfect. I can hear myself on the stream, so that's great. Cool. So let's see what we will do today. This is gonna be a different video than what we usually do because it's actually a performed exercise. I just need to switch to this so that you can see what will happen today. So first of all, we're going to do a quick introduction. Then we will talk about what is an architectural kata and why is architectural kata so interesting. And then we'll do a quick introduction to the exercise that we picked for today. And then we'll do some architecting, and in the end, closing. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them on the YouTube chat. And it's great. If you see this after, that's fine. That's perfectly cool. Just leave us some comments. I'm very interested to know what you think about this type of live stream, because I'd like to do some more. And the more people tell me that it's interesting, the more chances I have to actually do this. So yeah, let me know. All right. So let's start with a quick introduction. I'm not sure if I introduced myself. I'm Alex Bolboaca. I'm coming at you from the Mozaic Works studios as usual. And what I'm doing most of the time is working with people, with software development organizations, to make sure, well, to help them overcome challenges and change their mindsets when this is needed. But today we're going to do some architecture. What is an architectural kata? Let's start with this. An architectural kata is an exercise. Initially, it was created by Ted Newart, and then he started a community and created a bunch of architectural exercises. And so he's the main person to be credited with this. And the fundamental idea with architectural katas is that, you know, how there are two quotes here that I think summarize it really well. First, Fred Brooks, how do we get great designers? Great designers design, of course. So the idea is that in order to get better at design, you need to actually practice design. And the same comes to architecture. So and then Ted Newart asks, how are we supposed to get great architects if they only get the chance to architect fewer than a half dozen times in their career? Because what usually happens is projects start, they last for a very long time, and then you have a chance of influencing the architecture in the beginning, and then at some certain points during the development of the product. Of course, there's a lot of architectural work during the development of a product over a longer period of time. But typically what you have is in the beginning, right? In the beginning, you need to do the most of it. And because this happens so rarely, you don't actually get um, a lot of chances to practice architecture, which is probably why you feel overwhelmed when you need to start from scratch. Software architecture is something that we want to do, we'd love to do, but it's always a bit overwhelming. So Tenured created this idea of architectural kata. So basically what you have is usually you do this in a group and you gather a bunch of people who want to practice architecture. You pick a problem. Let's say he has this random selector on his website where you can click and it gives you a random one. And if you don't like it, you can pick another one and so on. And basically, you pick one problem, you split into smaller groups. I think the way I've done it is ideally between 3, maximum 5 people in a group. Ideally, they have a whiteboard or something where some place like Miro where they can add, remove, collaborate. It's very important to be able to delete things, which is why whiteboards are so great. Still one of the best tools for software architecture is a whiteboard. And you work in parallel and then you present your solution and then you compare it with the other groups and maybe you get some feedback from the facilitator or from the other groups and so on. So it's really an exercise that you can do and repeat. And the basic idea here is that for every problem, especially for these problems that are kind of open-ended, as you will see, there are a number of different solutions. In general, there is no perfect solution when it comes to software architecture. The best you can do is a solution that is the least worse, because you always have trade-off in software architecture. And because of that, the solution that I will come to today will not fit the solution that you come to. But by seeing these differences and discussing the way we think about them is how we get to become better architects. Because one of the most important skills for software architects is to generate possible solutions and then for each solution to discuss and to identify trade-offs. Every organization will be different, every team will be different, and architecture needs to map on these organizational constraints. It's not only about the technical part, it's a socio-technical system. So basically, when you design an architecture, it needs to fit your organization as well. Now, these problems are a little bit out of context, which is why it's so interesting to see the variations in implementation between different groups. Okay, so this is kind of a quick intro to what an architectural kata is. Now, what I will do today is not an architectural kata as it initially was meant. We are not going to do a community style or a group kata. What I'm going to do is what could be called a performing kata, because what I am doing is performing this exercise. So I will take the problem, I will go through a few steps for architecture. There are a few additional constraints that I like to set and that I set for myself for today, and I'm going to talk about those in a moment. And of course, the results will be different and we can discuss them. So if you have any comments, questions, that would be great. Cool. Let's see the problem now. I picked one at random and I picked a problem that I haven't solved before because, well, I've done a lot of these katas with different groups, but on purpose, I didn't want to pick one that I know because I don't want to show you an artificial environment, an artificial way of performing this kata, but rather I like to show you the real thing with all possible mistakes and questions that I'm asking and so on, because this is what architecting is about. It's not only about this is the perfect solution, look how I come to it. So we'll read through the problem in a moment. In addition to this, let me add this. So you also have the link. It's called Road Warrior. You can find it on that website on architecturalkatas.com. But first, let me put some constraints. I'm thinking about doing some kind of domain modeling. It's not necessary for all problems, but I think this is an interesting technique that we can explore. And the second thing I would like to do is to do plant UML diagrams. I'm not going to use C4. I may start with one diagram so maybe system diagram, system context diagram borrowed from C4. Maybe something similar, because I think that's actually very, very useful in most of the times. Now, I don't want this to mean that other ways of doing architecture are wrong. Again, these are just a few ideas that I came with. So, and it's possible that might use microservices. And the reason for that is that this is such a prevalent architecture nowadays that perhaps is worth trying it out for these specific problems. Now, I might have to adjust a little bit the requirements in order to do that, but we'll see this in a moment. Normally, when you have questions, these problems are not complete. So when you have questions about the features, normally you ask a facilitator. I am the facilitator, so I will actually pick whatever I find more interesting, right? Okay, so these are the rules, the constraints. This is what we're gonna do. Cool. And now let's read through this, and bear in mind, it's my first time reading this. I just went a little bit over the kind of skimmed reading it, but I don't know it in detail. And I don't remember ever doing it. I may have at some point, but I forgot how I did it then, which is good. I wanted to do as clean as possible, let's say. Road Warrior. A major travel agency wants to build a next generation online trip management dashboard. So let me next generation online trip management dashboard. I'm gonna emphasize a few words here. To allow travelers to see all of their existing reservations organized by trip, either online or through their mobile device. Okay, Users, 10,000 registered users worldwide. 10,000 plus, okay. Requirements. The system must interface with the agency's existing airline, hotel, and car rental interface system. So we have an existing system here. Let me just maybe, can I make this kind of purple? Okay, I don't like this. Let's try to make this another color. Okay. So we have an existing system to automatically load reservations via frequent flyer accounts, hotel point accounts, and car rental rewards accounts. I need to tell, well, to go on GitHub, and there are a few extra spaces here in the description, and I can make a pull request. Customers should be able to add existing reservations manually. Okay. So this is another feature. Items in the dashboard should be able to be grouped by trip. And once the trip is complete, the item should automatically be removed. Okay. Users should also be able to share their trip information by interfacing with standard social media sites. All right, so this could be another one that I like to emphasize with a color. Richest user interface possible across all deployment platforms. All right. That's interesting. Additional context must integrate seamlessly with existing travel systems. So this is another integration point. Partnership deals are being negotiated to create favored vendors, must work internationally. All right. So what do we extract from this? Let's see. I like to use, normally I like to use a mind map, but this time let's try to use something simpler here. So we have two types of requirements, right? We have functional and we have we can call them non-functional, cross-functional, however you want. And when it comes to cross-functional, we tend to have the big four. Performance, scalability, reliability or availability. I'm going to simplify things a lot, okay? So I know these are not exactly the same, but for the goals of our exercise, it's going to be just about a few hours. I'm not going to bother with every possible nuance. Okay. So these are the big four. Now we have another one, which is richest user interface possible. So we have rich user interface on all platforms. What this tells me is that we need to pick technologies. So where is this a problem? Do we have a desktop app? I don't think so. It said either online or through the mobile device. So we have two types of, we have mobile, where we will have rich user interface, even if we use the normal development kits. And then what we'll have is web. Well, we need to use what? WebAssembly? I mean, if it's richest, it won't be React, it should be WebAssembly. Okay. So the fun thing is that I'm working on a game right now, on a learning game for software developers. And I'm using Godot to create the game engine Godot to create a WebAssembly application, which is quite fun. Okay, cool. So if we want the richest one, it would be WebAssembly, because you can do 2D, you can do 3D if you want. Now I imagine that you don't want 3D interface for your dashboard, but you can have a very rich interface here. But honestly, I think this is an overkill. So I think what they are actually telling me is React. Although, to be honest, I don't like this. What I would prefer is web components plus HTMX. I think the whole React thing is overly complicated. And we can do the same thing with web components and HTMX, or at least for what we need for this particular product. If you don't know HTMX, it's a library that adds HTML custom attributes that you can use to have events, like, for example, when I click on this div, then do this Ajax call and then replace this other div with what's returned from it. So that's what it's doing, and it's really cool. Of course, it's a bit different from what you are used right now if you are doing React or something like that. But yeah, I'm gonna stick with this. I like this more. I think it's simple. Okay. Now, in terms of, I think we're gonna come back with performance, scalability, reliability. 10,000 plus is not that much. Okay, it seems pretty small number, because if you have 10,000 users registered worldwide, chances are they will not enter the site at the same time. First, it's about trips. So it's not a website where they will come every day. It's something when they will come when they need to manage their trips. Second, so there will be some periods, right? Even maybe for business trips, maybe for holidays, they will have specific periods when in the year when they will come. So the distribution in the year will be different, which means that chances are that we need some kind of elasticity. This system will go up and down. So it's possible that we'll have, let's say, 1,000 users online at some point in May or June or September, or whenever people are planning their holidays, depending on culture. That's another thing, because different cultures plan differently. So Some cultures tend to plan very far in advance, and others very close to the point of holiday. And then you have business trips, which tend to be distributed in other ways. But chances are, with 10,000 plus, I mean, if it's around 10,000, even if it's around, let's say, 50,000, chances are we'll get maybe 1,000 at one point, which is not that much with current infrastructure. Okay, that should work fairly fine without a lot of. I mean, you could have a monolith, and I think it would work perfectly fine. And then it's also because they are worldwide, they'll be distributed during the day, right? So not everybody will be awake at the same time, which means, let's say, you'll probably have in the afternoons, but because it's worldwide, the afternoon varies depending on the location of the user. So, yeah. Which means that scalability doesn't seem to be such a big problem. It's probably something that we can deal with pretty straightforward. Performance doesn't seem to be such a big problem. Reliability. Now, this is something that we probably need to focus on, because what happens if, so imagine using this website, but you are not using it every day, right? You are using it when you need it. And if when you need it, it doesn't work, that's a really big problem. You won't trust it anymore. So it's important for this site to be reliable. It's important to be available. It's important for it to be up whenever people are coming. This means that we need to look into some kind of minimal downtime deployment. Okay. Whenever we make updates, it should be fairly quick, a few minutes and then up. It doesn't have to be all the time up. I mean, it would be nice. But if it's for a few minutes and you have an announcement on the first page, and if this is happening when there's low traffic, then I think we can get away with this. So all in all, this doesn't seem to be such a big challenge if you have only 10,000 plus. Now, there are some additional challenges, which is why I think we need to look at system context diagram. This is where it's really useful. And okay, I'm gonna move to a diagram now. So what we want is to have our system. Let's see if I can find some blocks. I know I have some shape lines here. Okay, I'm gonna use this as this is our system. So we are gonna call it road warriors, because this is okay, or road warrior, and let me change quickly this and this. Oh, come on. Good. And I want you to be bold, and I'd like you to be up and to be slightly bigger. And then I'd like to have, it's ideal to have a description here. Our dashboard, trip dashboard, trip management dashboard. Okay, so we'll put this in center, and then this needs to interact with a few outside things. The agency has an existing airline, hotel, and car rental interface system. Let me make this a different color, maybe thicker, and just to make sure that we, okay, so this will be our system. Now let's add another one which will be less thick, and let's make it a different color. This, okay. So we have a system that is the, how they call it? Airline hotel car rental interface system. Interface system. Car rental hotel airline. Okay, so this will go further on and talk to the outside world. I need another block that will show me what is inside and what is outside. I don't know, I see the blocks. No. Shapes. Okay. So we need another block that will give us the boundary of our system. I'm gonna make this same color, but, or actually it's not the same. Something like that. But what I like to do is to have it like this. Okay. Sorry. So this is our agency infrastructure. Now I don't understand whether this is a SaaS system, is this an external API, is this installed on our infrastructure? So that's a bit of a question. So I'm not sure about this. The next thing that we need to interface with, add manually, group by trip, share the trip information by interfacing with standard social media sites. So we also need to interface with social media sites. And here we have a problem. Do we use some kind of general API that connects with everything, or do we use just one kind of aggregator that works with multiples? I don't know. Richest user interface, existing travel systems. Okay, so we'll also need existing travel systems. So I don't know, what would this be? booking.com, something like that. I don't know. And of course, what we'll have, so this is what I'm assuming is internal. And we'll have on the external, can I find the user? Okay. And browser. General browser. And maybe a mobile. Mobile. Okay. So we have this. All right. So basically the user will discuss with browser or mobile. And then these will need to talk to our system. Okay, and this is more or less, well, a first iteration of our system context diagram road warrior iteration 1. And I need this to be centered, and I need to center you. And perhaps no, too big. I think this is good. Maybe just add a little bit of background so that we can see it's a different kind of object. Okay. Right, so this gives me a first view on, no, I don't like to have actor in general, so we'll have traveler. Because basically what we have is the traveler using the browser or the mobile to access the trip management dashboard that connects to car rental, hotel, airline, existing travel systems. And then we have two social media websites. Now I wonder whether this should not be here and here rather than here. Because usually what you have right now is you have the ability in the browser to share things, and you have ability in mobile phones to share things. So I think this connection will be here rather than within our context. Let's make this smaller. Maybe place it. Where should we place it? Let's place it here. I don't like this very much, but let's say it's the best. Well, it's the most compact way of presenting. Okay, so we want this centered, and I'd also like this. No, not you. You. Centered and centered. Okay. So this solves one of the issues, which is how do we integrate with social media sites. We'll do our best to integrate through here. And then I can place this down here. Okay. All right. So here we need to figure out question. example of an existing travel system. Booking.com is one of them. Good. And then here we have a question about this system. Is this internal or and I always find very useful to write questions at this point in our architecture, because this allows us to sort out misunderstandings fairly quickly. Let me move the whole thing a little bit here because we have some space. And maybe also place this. Okay. Nice. Now, there are a few things that I like to set here, but I'm gonna stop. That's pretty much what we currently understand about this diagram. Okay, so we have our system context diagram. Let me rename this. Frame system context diagram. Cool. And now this gives us a few important information. It tells us that we have to integrate with things we don't know yet, which means that the biggest challenge here is going to be reliability on one hand, because this depends on the others, but it's also going to be stability in the sense of connecting with outside platforms. So it looks to me as if these are the two most important ones. It doesn't mean that we don't have other ones, but particularly security will be, security. All of these are always important, but it's important to understand where we stand with them. Okay, so our next step can be now to do some kind of domain modeling. As I said, I want to do a bit of domain modeling for this. And let's see what we have in terms of domain. So trip management dashboard allows travelers to see all their existing reservation organized by trip, either online or through their mobile device. I already see a few domain objects. What should I use as domain object? Let me use an octagon. I haven't used octagons for a while, so I think they look cool. That's a good thing, right? You pick the shapes based on what looks cool. That's how we are doing architecture. I'm kidding. It's just when you do these more or less freestyle exercises, you have the chance of going outside your normal routine, and that's fun. So you can have fun with architecture in this way. Cool. Right, so let's look now at the domain model. So I see traveler, I see trip, I see hotel reservation, I see, come on, plane reservation, and car rental reservation. Okay. What are other things? So airline, hotel, car. Okay, we have frequent flyer accounts, hotel point accounts, car rental rewards accounts. So this will load reservation through these accounts. Oh, that's interesting. And car rental. Okay, so if I'm going here, this thing require account rewards account. This is an important observation. Now what I don't like is that the question, but I think I'm gonna add the question on a being posted instead. Okay. I'm gonna place this here and I'll have another ping posted here. And I'm gonna make you smaller and you're gonna be here. Okay. Better. Okay. Plane, car rental. So all these will require some kind of rewards account. Let's add this. Hotel rewards account. Plane rewards account. And car rental rewards account. And let me quickly check if this is correct. So airline, hotel, frequent flyer, hotel point, car rental rewards. Okay, so it will be hotel point, plane rewards, no, plane frequent flyer, and car rental rewards, right? So hotel point, frequent flyer, car rental rewards. Hotel point, frequent flyers, car rental rewards. It's important to use the same language from the description because this is the domain language. So now normally you'd have a conversation and in the conversation you might hear additional terms and you need to use those terms. But here it's really important to use this. Customers should be able to add existing reservations manually as well. So we need to have, we need to have this. Which means that we will also have manual reservations. So these reservations come either from these accounts or they will be created manually. Let me just, yeah, there's a difference between the manual and let me just make sure, right? So we have a manual created. We have a manually created. I'm not sure this makes sense as a different domain entity, but we'll see. And manually created hotel. Okay. Items on the dashboard should be able to be grouped by trip. Once the trip is complete, the item should automatically be removed from the dashboard. So there is a kind of a process here. And the process is, we'll need some kind of a state machine for the trip. So let's look at this. We'll have, I want to have a trip states. So trip starts by being created. At least one of hotel, plane, car rental, reservation. Why? Oh, okay. So we created the list one. And this will be created state. And then this moves into progress, maybe, where can add additional reservations. And it is shown on the dashboard. And then, so now the thing is, let's say you make the trip, you do the hotel reservation, you fly. What will happen then? Do we mark each one of those as done? So item should be able to be grouped by trip. The item should be removed by dashboard. I imagine we need to mark, so it will be in progress. Each reservation is marked as, or reservations marked as done in turn. And then it will need to be finished when all reservations marked as done. And now the question is, how do we mark these as done? Based on date. This is an interesting question. Once again, let me copy this. Based on date, based on status reported by user. Okay. So this should show what is telling us. Items should be able to group by trip. Once the trip is complete, the item should automatically be removed from the dashboard. So these are automatically removed, which means these become archived. No longer shown on dashboard. And I imagine this will still be shown. Still shown dashboard. Maybe we won't show the status on each of those, but we might need to still show in general. Okay. So these are the trip states. Let's make this bigger. And let's, okay. Now let's go back to our model. What else? We have a reservation, we have group by trip, we have a trip status. Let's make it separate. For now, I'm not sure it needs to be separate, but user should be able to share their trip information. Okay, so we need some kind of link to a trip that is made public. I imagine by default this will be private, but you can make kind of a public trip information. Things that you can share. Maybe you don't want to share, I mean, yeah, what do you want to share? Do you want to share the plane line? You don't want to share the number of the ticket or any of those confidential details, but I imagine you won't get these anyways. So basically what you need to have is from where you're flying to, what time you're leaving, the airline. It can get pretty tricky. Maybe you don't want to share everything. There was a site that was doing this, if I remember correctly. I never found it that. I mean, it's interesting when you are traveling a lot and you are a consultant for people to see where you are going. But it would be better to share after you left, kind of. So not before, or at least I would feel better if you do that. So that's maybe a question about privacy, right? What level of privacy do we require? Do you share before? How do you do this? Anyway, user should be able to share their trip information, richest user interface possible, must integrate with existing travel systems, and must work internationally. Now this thing with working internationally is, oh, okay. Forgot one thing here, which is internationalization, which means a few things. Translated in multiple, so localization. Careful with time, zones and stuff. I'm writing this because a lot of bugs are related with date and time. So Okay, and maybe specific relation. Like for example, GDPR. If you're doing this for the EU, you need to do GDPR. If you're doing this on the Chinese market, I don't know exactly what you need to do there, but there will be some specific requirements, right? Okay, so it seems that we have these three that are important. All right. So we have this. These are our domain entities. And now let's try to group them. Okay, so trip state machine. I'm gonna move this down because I need to make this a little bit bigger. And we have we need to look now in the domain in the bounded context. So I think we have a trip bounded context. Let me place this up, make this bold, maybe a bit larger. And here we have traveler trip status. Now, this is far from being a complete domain model, right? We might need to add some arrows and stuff, but it's good enough for now. We are iterating on all of these things. None of these are final. Okay, now there are some so there's a trip bounded context. There's a public trip information context, I think. Public trip info, or maybe trip sharing context. Well, we have this. And then we have, so actually the manually created stuff is here. And now what I'm wondering, do we have a hotel bounded context, a plane bounded context? I think so, because these change separately. So yeah, we have a trip. But then what's a bit weird is that we might also have an integration bounded context, because you need to integrate somehow. But I'm thinking, let's place these three together, and we'll have hotel reservation context. No, I don't like these colors. So let's see, can we find? No. Maybe something like that. I think I like this better. Okay. Paste style. And can I paste again? Yes. Good. Okay, so this one is clear. Okay, I need to move this way down. Okay. You are here. You are here. And then we have plane, where we have manually created plane, a plane reservation, plane frequent flyer account. And then we have car rental. Well, we have manually created car rental rewards account. Good. This is pretty good. I like it. Now there's still a question of whether these should be separate or not. Because the thing is, these are taken from an external system. So should we separate from manually created and those that are from an external system? I think not. So I think what we actually need, right? Yeah, this is what I was missing. What we are missing is a kind of integration layer. So we don't have a different thing here. But this is our core domain reservation, which contains the data that we need. However, when we implement this, we'll have an integration layer that takes, that calls the necessary APIs, gets the data, translates it into our core domain data. So basically what we need to have is, let's see if we can draw this. We'll have our context, trip context, and this one will be a hotel reservation context, and I have a plane, and we'll have a car rental. Okay, and this needs to talk to these three in order to get the necessary data for our trip. And then what we'll have is the public trip sharing, which will be connected to this. And then what we'll have is a few ways of getting hotel reservations, and one will be hotel reservation from how did we call that, interface system. And then we'll have hotel reservation from booking.com and so on. So we'll basically need to create a number of these based on what we need. And these we'll use as the interface and translation into our domain things, our domain objects. And then we'll have the same thing here. We'll have plane, reservation, plane, reservation from what's up. I think there were some plane, fly, something. Well, we can pick a line, let's say Lufthansa. And from other. Okay, and then we'll have car rental from interface system, car rental from, let's say, Hertz as an example, and additional car rentals. Okay. And this is kind of our system, right? The context goes here. Tip sharing. Now, one challenge with this model, this is a great model. However, what it doesn't take into account is that there will be different ways to interface with it. So right now what we know is that we need to have the accounts. Frequent flyer account, hotel point accounts, car rental rewards accounts. But if you're going, let's say, from booking, you'll need to interface in a different way. You need to go through their API. So it doesn't help that you have the account for the hotel. What you'll need is create a OAuth application on booking and interface with them and so on. And the user can connect that application and then get the trips from there and all that, right? So the question is whether these accounts are here or are here. That's the big question. And the thing is that this will have impact on the interface, right? Because it would be nice to have it only here. You add it somewhere in the configuration file and you don't care. But in reality, what you need is the user to connect to that specific service, which means that you need to have the UI allowing the user to add these different services. Which means that actually the big problem here is extensibility with different systems. And okay, we can go with OAuth because it's, let's say, the general approach to this, but maybe it won't work for everything. Is the de facto standard right now, but who knows? Okay. All right, so we've done about 1 hour of architecting. Let's take a quick break. And I want to tell you about a few things that we are doing at Mozaic Works. First, quickly. We have a few courses that I like to talk to you about and tell you a few words. First of all, microservices. Microservices are the de facto standard for architecture for most organizations right now. But even though they have been around for a while, people still have issues with microservices. And one example that I commonly have is a number of developers told me, business, product people, they asked them to implement features that turned out to be against the CAP theorem. And this is not possible because, once they learned about the CAP theorem, they understood, oh, this is actually not possible. And we were working in vain. We were just trying to solve this problem that is unsolvable, but we had no idea it's unsolvable. And I think this is a normal way because what happened a lot with software architecture and with microservices is people saw microservices and they said, okay, this is a good technique, let's try to use it. They started using it in practice, but without sitting down and understanding the complexity and all the ins and outs of this architectural style. So the idea is it's worth spending some time to understand the trade-offs and challenges of software architecture and how to avoid them. And we have this practical hands-on exercise, hands-on learning program where we have, let's say, 4 sessions of about 4 hours where we go through very brief presentations and then I show you a technique and we work on it together, and then you work on it in groups and we talk about the technique and you learn how to apply it. So after all these sessions, you get a lot of practice, you understand how to solve and what are the main challenges and how to solve the main challenges with microservices. But even more important is that after this, usually what happens after a course, well, you go back to your work, you start getting busy, you forget a lot of the things that you've learned. And in order to deal with this, what you have from us is 90 days access to learning materials. So you can revisit what we discussed during the course through articles, exercises, examples, videos that, when you go back to your system and you realize, oh, we are working against the CAP theorem, but what was the CAP theorem? Let me go back to this learning platform and look into the CAP theorem and understand again what it's about. And that's how we do these learning programs. And even better, you can still ask me questions after that. So if you hit a specific problem, then maybe we've discussed a little bit, but not in enough detail because, time is limited. And you have a very specific problem on your infrastructure, you can then ask and you'll get an answer either written or as a video on the platform, or as a video on YouTube. It's really great, a follow-up. Moreover, maybe you don't want this particular course. Maybe you're saying, oh, we don't care about part of it, or maybe we are not doing really microservices, we are doing a kind of microservices architecture, but not truly this thing, and maybe I want to learn about how I can apply practices for architecture to our specific styles. Well, we can discuss the topics that you want, and we create a custom learning program and we deliver it, and yeah, it all in collaboration with you. So that is really great. So this is one course that I invite you to look into, architecting microservices. Now, if you're not doing microservices, another thing that might be interesting to you is a more general architecture. So what happens with architects? What happens with architects is that you get, how do you become a software architect? Or you start by being a programmer, and then at some point you get promoted to software architect, and you realize that it's a completely different thing. As a software developer, you may not know this, but software architecture is very different. Okay, there's a technical part, but there's a lot about communication. There you need to do diagrams, you need to talk to business people, you need to talk to product people, you need to talk to developers, to tester, to infrastructure, to security, to marketing, to legal. There are a lot of different perspectives that you need to cover. And another big challenge is that when you are a developer, you know your code works. It works on your machine. It works on multiple machines. It's pretty predictable. When you are an architect, you realize that there is no perfect solution. There are always trade-offs in software architecture. So that's a big challenge for software architects. And after you have done this for a while, you start ad hoc, right? You try to learn on the job, you do things, and after a while, maybe you want to go back. After you've done maybe 3 years or 4 years of software architecture, you want to go back and structure the things that you know, plus learn a few more things. And this is where this course comes in, Software Architecture Principles. This is a course that takes you through the architecture role, through the phases of software architecture, through the main principles for software architecture, things like single responsibility, modularity, you know, all these principles that you heard about. And you practice once again with the trainer. It can be me. You practice architecture. You learn how to, or you already know probably, but you try other ways of doing this. You try maybe domain modeling because you haven't done domain modeling. You try architecture diagrams as code, do a little bit of PlantUML to see if it fits you. Try architecture decision records, which are a really good way of storing knowledge about software architecture. Maybe you try architectural tests, which are a really good way of restricting and constraining your architecture so that you avoid a lot of issues. So this is for architects that are experienced but want to structure their knowledge. If you are a beginner, we have another course which is called From Developer to Architect. So if you are in your first year, in your first 2 years, if you are about to be promoted as a software architect, or if you are a developer who takes on architecting responsibilities, then yeah, you can have this course and learn about the change, and will help you through this change to understand what to expect from this change. All these courses have been really appreciated by participants. It's always been fun to do them. Participants have had their aha moments, and everything is practical, everything is hands-on. You have the resources available on our learning platform for 90 days. You can ask questions. So it's more of a longer term support for mindset change rather than just to have a today's course and forget about it. Right? It's more about helping you to actually apply things that are useful for you in your context. That's what we are aiming for. All right, so if you want to learn about this, visit our website, mosaicworks.com, Mozaec Works, WORKS. So Mosaic is with a Z, mosaicworks.com, and there you will find the calendar with the next scheduled courses and ways to contact us to ask for customized learning programs that help you within your particular context. We've done a number of these learning programs where people have come to us and said, okay, we have this problem. I don't know how to solve it, but let's discuss. And through the conversations, we proposed an agenda, we built a learning program, deliver it, allowed access to resources for 90 days. And people live happy because these are things that actually help them in their environment. All right. So that's it for now. Let's go back to our architectural kata. First, let me get some water. Architecture is makes you thirsty, right? Okay. If you haven't done a lot of architecture, you can see how many different perspectives you need to take into account. I mean, these are not standard diagrams, the things that I've done, and they are not done in a standard way. But the thing is, you need to do whatever you need in order to understand and in order to transfer knowledge. Because what happens with this is, let's say you create this architecture and then the next step is you'll need to discuss it with business people, with product people, with infrastructure, with developers, with testers. And so each of them will have questions, and it helps to have all these different perspectives, right? Okay, so let's go back to this. Right now, what I have as a challenge is these accounts. And honestly, I think this will not be here. No. So how would we structure this? I think we need another thing, which is trip. Well, how would I call it? So there's one thing with the trip. Well, it's actually with the traveler accounts, maybe. And here we can have types of accounts. All right. So let's see. The traveler will have one, well, 0 or many. The traveler has 0 or many trips. Each trip will have a trip status. This is one-to-one. Maybe we don't need to have it separate. Maybe it just needs to be trip and have a field here and then no. And then a trip will have 0 or more hotel reservations. Zero or more plane reservations. Zero or more car rental reservations. And now what I'm wondering is, because this is, okay, do we need a separate context for hotel, plane, car? How do this change? So traveler, trip, trip status. This will be pretty static, right? Is it possible to add other things to a trip? Well, maybe you might have restaurant reservations. But what changes is in the reservation context. So let's try this out. Reservation context. How about we do this? So here we might add, one thing that I like is to think about how the architecture could evolve. And one thing that I would expect here is we already have a bunch of these things, but we can have other reservations. So, e.g., restaurant experience. Maybe you want to extend this to things like a sailing trip or a visit to a museum or going to a cultural event, or right? Because it's not very clear if, okay, right now we are only limiting to hotel, plane, car. But you know how product people are. They will certainly ask for something more at some point. But the thing is, it doesn't matter, because from our point of view, let's say if we add another one, we'll just do another 0 or more here. 0 or more. And we'll have one entity for each of these, and that's gonna be it. And we'll keep adding. So it doesn't seem that, it's breaking our system in any significant way. Okay. So that's fine. If we have a reservation context, what I'm trying to figure out is the coupling between the different bounded contexts. So if I were to add something more to this, another entity, what will change? It will also only change the trip. Well, it will also change the integration, but that's bound to happen. We can't avoid that. Now the thing is, traveler accounts, right? So if we need a restaurant thing, we'll have another account here that will take restaurant reservations. Did we select everything? Seems so. So I'll move the trip for now here. So the traveler will need to have one or more, well, actually 0 or more of these. 0 or more. 0 or more. 0 or more. Okay. I'm gonna no, I don't want to change that as well. I want to change this. And then if we add some additional things, other accounts, e.g. restaurant, cultural event, yeah. So maybe you add your Ticketmaster account and you can get the concert tickets from your Ticketmaster account and or the restaurant reservation and so on. Good. So this is just where we are creating those and we are creating the connection. So there will be some this will be where you create the account, maybe connect through OAuth or another way. Now the public trip information, this will come from the trip. Where should we place you? I think you should be up. So this is one of the things I like about Miro, that you can expand things as you need. Nope. Nope. One of the things I don't like about Miro is that it's not selecting what I want when I want. Ah, come on. Okay. I'm gonna lock you. No. Okay, and this. And this. And this. No. No. Okay. And I need you to go on top. And I need you to go here. And you to go here. Okay. And then we'll move the trip slightly. And we'll move this a little bit down. Very exciting, right? Architecture is exciting. Moving blocks on on a diagram. Well, that's the process. Sorry. That's the best we can do. Okay, so now we are starting to get somewhere. So this will give us traveler accounts, okay. And then we'll have another bounded context, which is basically reservations recovered from external systems. And here we might have hotel reservation from what was it called? Interface system. Interface system. We might have a hotel reservation from booking.com. We might have a plain reservation from interface system, and we might have a plain reservation from Lufthansa, and reservation from and basically everything that is hotel turns into our internal hotel reservation. Everything that is plane turns into our internal plane reservation. Everything that is car turns into car reservation, and so on, right? So this represents this part. And this has a connection with two things. One is with the account, and the other is with hotel. Right? So this is how this is gonna work. Maybe, yeah, have it on top as well. Right? So we need the account in order to make the interface, although probably we don't need the account. We'll make the connection with the account, we'll save the auth credentials, and what we'll actually need is the credentials that we use in order to access the system. So probably we'll have another one, which is credentials. How do we call them? Integration credentials. So we'll have, let's say, auth credentials for booking.com, for example. Right, and these will be what we need for here. Now, if you are using their interface system, this means that we'll have, so the interface is probably managing this. So instead of integration credentials, what you'll have is the interface system. So this is not really, this is gonna connect here. This is for the ones that they were saying we'll need in the future. But, okay, so this means we'll have a credential store of some sort. Okay. So we have this, and we have in parallel our interface system. Imagine we'll need some interface system credentials here, right? So perhaps, yeah, I think we'll need interface system credentials. And those will be used by this, by this, and by the other one. That is the car rental from interface system. Okay. And then these other ones are the ones that we'll need to add in the future. Because we need to interface with this somehow. So the way I imagine this works is you have a hotel point account. You use it to create credentials for the interface system for that particular account. That one recovers the data, and then we get the information here and turn it into a hotel reservation, and that's the flow. Right. So I think now I've come to a full understanding, well, a better understanding of what is going on. What I like to do when we make this clear that this is to come. Okay. So this is probably something that we'll need to do in the future. But this kind of architecture will allow for our extensibility. So now let's think about other changes. If we want to add another type of reservation, like restaurant event, we need to add one here, which is the entity in our domain. We can allow our traveler to create it manually. And once it's created manually, it becomes part of the trip. So we need to add another field or stage or possible stage to the trip. And then if we want to automate this, we need to add an external system. We need to add the credentials. We need to add an account to the traveler. So if this changes, we are covered, it seems. Okay, there is work to do, but it's clear what we need to do. Yeah, and I think that kind of sorts out everything. Now we also have the trip states. So this is okay, it's still a first iteration. I'm not fully happy with all of this. We need to define these better. Another thing that we might look at is okay, so let's look at this. Extensibility connected with outside platforms. I think I've covered this right now. Okay, we still have to work on the architecture to show the modules, right? Those are not yet defined. Reliability. So reliability will depend on the reliability of external systems and on the reliability of our own system. For our own system, we need minimal downtime deployment. For connection with external systems, we'll need to figure out retries, some ways to show the data even if those systems don't work, which is why we cache them. So it will be eventual consistency, right? If, let's say, if booking.com is down, it will not get the information right now. You can still create it manually if you want. And that brings up a really interesting problem, which is duplication. Duplication. Okay. Duplication. What if a traveler first creates manually a trip and then gets the same info from the from external service? I mean, the easy way is to have this as you edit and then they can choose to hide it or remove it. But we need to take it into account somehow, right? So another open question. Okay, internationalization, I didn't focus much on this. We'll need to make sure that we are showing in the time zone of, there will be a lot of discussions here because plane tickets, you need to show them in the local time zone. Events, you need to show them in the time zone of destination, I think, right? I mean, yeah, everything will need to be in the destination time zone and not in your time zone. We need to pay attention to this anyway. So this needs to be discussed case by case. And specific regulation. Right now, I don't have a very clear example other than GDPR in California, privacy thing. But in our case, it would be having just enough data. I mean, we don't want to store a lot of data. The question is whether you delete. I think we need to archive the data. I usually don't feel good about deleting immediately, but one thing we can do is to delete the data after a while. E.g., I don't know, 10 days. Or maybe you ask the user to define, right? So that would be a good idea. Okay, so what leaves us is Width is, of course, there's a lot more, but it's been almost 2 hours, so let's see how we can conclude this in a more satisfactory way. I still believe we've covered a lot of ground, and we can definitely continue with this exercise if you find it useful, but you'll have to let me know in the comments. So let's see. What else? Another thing we could do is to think about an architectural style that works for this. And I said I'm gonna do a little bit of plant.uml, but I think this time I won't. Architectural style. Okay. So we have a few modules that we've already seen. We can map these to modules pretty easily because we can have, okay, I'm gonna remove the bounded context. So we have trip, reservation, traveler accounts, reservations, yeah, integration with external systems, integration credentials. So what I think we have is more or less this. We'll have a mobile application. Okay. Let's see, mobile, web, browser. Okay. We'll have a actor. Be traveler. We haven't covered a number of things like administrator, the roles. We just focused on the main actor. But I think it's fine for what we're trying to do. So we have this. We'll have a module. Well, we'll have an API, right? Road Warrior API. At least one, if not more. I'm tempted to do front-end for backend. No, sorry, backend for front-end. So probably I'll split this into Road Warrior Mobile API and Web API. And these are kind of aggregators for the things that are below. And below, what we'll need to have is, so this will be a web service of some form, HTTP service. The reason for those is so that we can, Well, it's a lot depending on context. Is this a startup? Is this an established company? Do we have a team that will do mobile? Because then they can also do this. Team that will do browser, they can also do this. And get precisely how they need things. If this is, as I said, HTMX plus web components, then you might need an API. You can, yeah, you can use a REST API, but maybe it's not the best one. Here, maybe you need a REST API or just need an API that fits the mobile. And then you can have a bunch of REST APIs here because you'll have traveler, trip, traveler accounts. You have traveler. And this can be REST API. And you can have trip, which is a REST API. And you can have traveler accounts, which is a REST API. And you can have reservations. And so on, right? And so if you're doing it like this, what we'll have is each of these will communicate with whatever they need. Well, they will basically need trip and traveler and reservation. And traveler accounts. Okay. And then from the other side, we need to feed the reservation from let me just call this integration systems. And I'm not sure how, I mean, this could be batch jobs. Some kind of, maybe a scheduled service. Like every hour you go and, or on demand. And no, it's the other way around. So this will fit this. Tell you, oh, there's a new reservation for something. And when you create the accounts, you also create credentials. Integration. And this credential for integration are used by this. Okay. So that's one way of doing this. Another way of doing this would be with hexagonal architecture, the modular monolith. So, and given that we don't need to me just copy this. So this will be close to microservices like. And this would be architectural style, hexagonal, which means we can have the same thing but encapsulated in a single. So instead of this being a REST API, this is let's say module, 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 module. This is also a module. I'm going to explain in a moment what I mean by this. And this is kind of a, it's a port plus adapter. Adapter, right? And here we'll have a port. So we could keep this, although we can have a single one. So we can have this together. As why don't you let me write things? Well, okay. Okay, let's put this up. Make it slightly bigger. Let's make you bold. Bold and bigger. Okay, so basically what we have is two service interfaces. This is the core domain model, and we implement it as modules inside our monolith. And this is using the ports and adapter structure. So for reservation, you'll have a port for each integration system, and you'll have an adapter. Well, you'll have a port, and then you'll have an adapter for each integration system. I talked a little bit on about modular monoliths. I did a full video last Saturday, so you can watch that one if you want to learn some more about how to structure this. And if you want me to talk a little bit more about hexagonal architecture, I'll be happy to do that as well. But let me know in the comments. So we have this. Cool. And let's talk trade-offs, right? This will scale as a unit. If you want to scale this up, you need to start more instances and so on. We haven't talked about database. This will have a single database server. Maybe you can have a kind of read connection and write connection. So use the command query request separation, CQRS. And in that way, you would have things that write to the database, things that read from the database. You can also have separate databases, one for traveler, one for trip, one for reservation, one for traveler accounts. That's perfectly fine. But this needs to scale as a whole. Since based on what we discussed in the beginning, the scalability requirements are not that big. So 10,000 plus users, even if let's say it's 100,000 users, across the world, chances are you'll have maybe 5,000 at a moment in time, which means that a monolith can probably deal with this quite easily, and that's the peak of activity. There doesn't seem to be a lot of interaction here, because what will users do? They will create an account, connect, enter to see their trips, maybe recover some information, and that's it. So it's just a few requests. Sharing probably happens on the mobile in the browser. So you create a link to something, some public information. Maybe, okay, there's another request, but not that much. It's not that much. So in my mind, this seems to be like a pretty okay way to start, as long as you follow the modules. Because once you start having calls between the modules and accessing the inner details of a module, then you get coupling, then you get big balls of mud, and that's not great anymore. This one is more on the side of microservices, where you'll probably have a database for each of these APIs. And then if you want, you can have also a messaging system. But I think, given that these are just a few services, you can safely use synchronous calls and waiting. Your latency won't go up much, because it's just one call to here, and this calls to a few things here. It can also cache. The data doesn't change that much. This one allows you to scale different parts differently. So maybe if the mobile application is more accessed, you can scale this up. If the browser accesses some more, you can scale this up. You can do more things with this, but it has a big problem. It's very complex. Managing these APIs, quite some complexity, right? It's not that easy to do. Now, one thing that we didn't talk about, and I like to do, is security. So let's talk a little bit about security. I think we cover pretty much the other things. So which one is better? Well, the basic architectural answer is it depends. It depends on on what your team can do, on how you predict that this will evolve, what budget you have for infrastructure, and so on. There's no perfect answer. There's always this question, but you always have trade-offs. So you need to figure out which are the particular trade-offs that make sense within your organization. For a startup, I'd probably go with this. If it's a small team, if we have multiple teams, we can go with this, because then we can parallelize the work, right? And we can implement all this fairly quickly. Let's talk a little bit about security. And we won't cover everything, but it's worth looking at this. And let's take the monolithic approach, for example. So first thing we need to do is to classify data assets. What data assets we have? Well, I'll make this bigger. Okay. And we have public data. Do we have anything? Maybe company. names, for example, Lufthansa and so on. And we'll have the public trip information. Whatever we decide will be there. And the details might depend on the user, on the local legislation, and so on. Then we have private data, which is usernames, user emails, user accounts, let's say secrets. Okay, user accounts, credentials. So email addresses. Trip information, private trip information, because we don't want everyone to know in which room you are staying at the hotel. I know this is not necessarily part of the reservation, but it's just to make a point. So we have the credentials, we have that. Okay. It doesn't seem that we'll have, I mean, are users paying for this? I don't know. They didn't say. Maybe it said supported. That's an interesting thing. One thing you need to pay a lot of attention is what business you're in. Partnership deals are being negotiated favor vendors of their existing reservations. Okay. Right. So we don't know how, I mean, it says customers. We don't know if they are paying for this or if it said supported, or because if they are paying for this, then we'll probably have their payment information here. But since we don't know, yeah. But as we know, that's usually part of a separate system, payment API, payment gateway of some sort. Okay, so we'll probably have user passwords or user credentials, user hotel external accounts, and credentials to access no systems. Right? What can a hacker do? So now these are the data assets. Now let's do a quick, very quick threat model. What could a potential attacker do? Normally you'd have to do a kind of data flow diagram, but I'm just gonna look at one of these diagrams and add some things. So a hacker could, potential attacker could convince the traveler to share information. Okay, basic social engineering. Potential attacker could steal the mobile phone. Could steal credentials, hijack browser session, blah, blah, blah. These are all general things. Where it's more interesting. So a potential attacker could create an account and try to access data of other travelers. Right, so they could do, for example, an enumeration attack. They see in the URL that you have the user ID 1000 and they try 1001 or 999, 900 and so on. And so these things need to block those types of requests. What else can happen? So what information can I input here? I can input the account. A potential attacker could create an account and connect to another traveler's account external systems. So let's say they managed to steal the Lufthansa credentials. They could create an account, add those credentials here, and they can see where you are traveling. So all your private information. How can we deal with this? Well, we could double check in some ways. Right? So that's an interesting question. How do we deal with this? If multiple accounts are created with the same credentials, and you can take the login, that's already a possible sign, right? You need to pay attention to this. What other information? I'm wondering if you can do a kind of server-side request forgery. So I'm assuming you cannot do any SQL injection because that would be silly. Cross-site scripting is definitely a problem, but it's here in the browser. I'm not gonna talk about this. But are there any URLs that I'm introducing here? The social media URLs. And then I'm using those to introduce a social media URL that is used by the server and can do SSRF attack. So server-side request forgery is something like you can introduce an URL, and instead of introducing, I don't know, x.com/ or facebook.com/, what you introduce is a file, column, / etc/passes of wd. And then when the server tries to access that URL, it actually recovers the password files, it returns it to the browser, and they can see the password file from the server, right? Normally, the way you do this is, in this case, you don't allow people to introduce URLs that are general, or you double check that those URLs are valid somehow and that they are not part of this. You can use a web application firewall, but also other verifications. Right, there is also the possibility for some kind of DNS attacks. If an attacker manages to go to, this is a bit more complicated. but they could hijack the DNS system on the server and call service day control instead of EG booking com API, right? This is a bit more complicated because it requires multiple phases. First, they need to go into the server somehow or modify the DNS settings. For example, host.conf, host config, something like that. And say, instead of using the normal DNS for booking.com, use this URL. And what this does is it calls a service they control, and then they can return data to be displayed in the interface. And maybe that's not a problem, but yeah, who knows? All right. So this is a bit more tricky to do. There are probably other ones, but we'll have to go into more details. And this brings me to, I think we're close to the end of this stream. I just want to tell you about one more thing, which is, since we talked about security, we have a learning program as well, which is called Cybersecurity for Developers, Secure Coding. You know, when you're doing security, two types of people are involved. You have the security professionals and you have the development side. You have infrastructure, of course, but they know what to do, I assume. What we are interested in is that we have the security professionals and they speak their own language, and we have developers who speak their own language and have their own mindset. Security professionals tend to be very paranoid about things, and they use language. For example, one of the terms that I really like is exfiltration. Exfiltration means, in cybersecurity, copying data. That's what it is. Attackers are copying data from your server, and we are calling this exfiltration. It's a nice way of calling those. This is just one of the terms that you learn. So if you are a developer interested in security, there's this barrier. There are a lot of terms, a lot of a different mindset, which is much more paranoid. But this is why we created this learning course, where you can come and first understand this, how security fits in, what different types are and how you deal with those. You can understand attackers and practice the hacker mindset. Actually hack in a controlled environment, of course, some applications that were created especially for this. And we're having some fun solving some enigmas there. And then you learn how to prevent this. You learn the vulnerabilities. You learn threat modeling. And you learn how to implement things so that they are more secure. So join me for a secure coding course. It's practical, it's hands-on. You'll do a lot of exercises. We'll try out various practices. We'll discuss about your challenges. I will do some demos. And you are left with practical things to do. And as one participant told me after this course, they had paranoia plus. So we wanted the developer paranoia to be slightly higher. Instead of us being just, happy builders, think a little bit about security. After you wrote every line of code or you finished the feature, just think a little bit, what could go wrong here? What could an attacker do with this? And this allows you to prevent issues before they actually happen. It's really cool. It's really cool. And you'll also have some fun. Have some fun together. As usual with our learning programs, you have 90 days access after to resources, including articles, videos, demos, other exercises you can do. And if this sounds like a good idea, but maybe you're thinking, oh, but I would like just to focus on this part. No worries, contact us. We can build a custom learning program for you focused on security. We also launched a completely new one recently. And this is really fun. This has been requested by a lot of people, which is for software architects, or architectural practices for security, where we look at the higher level view and the strategic view on security in software architecture. So if you want, if any of this sounds interesting, contact us. Visit our website, mosaicworks.com with a Z, MOZAICWORKS, KS, okay, .com. And you can, you have all our contact information. You can check us out. And you can see the full descriptions of these products and the schedule calendar, the things that we have already scheduled for this season. But yeah, let us know. Cool. So with this being said, we conclude our live stream for today. So to recap what we did an architectural kata, which is an exercise in architecture. I didn't do it as usual with a group. We did it as a performed exercise. I started from a problem that I didn't know much about, and we went through a few steps. We defined our requirements, we clarified them. We started with a system context diagram to put things in perspective. We did a domain model. We realized that we have some integration things to take into account. We did a state machine. We did 2 different architectures using microservices and hexagonal architecture. And we ended up with a bit of security. If you have any other ideas or questions or comments about this, well, you know where to find us. Let us know in the comments, and we'll be happy to tell you and to do more videos about this, to do more live streams if you found this interesting. So that's it for me for now. Thank you kindly for the view, and please like, share, subscribe. We are very close to 800 subscribers. I'd like to get to 800 subscribers soon. It would be really cool. And then beyond that, why not? Thank you kindly for the view. And until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart. And see you on Saturday. Bye-bye.